Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Built in Ohio. We have a recurring guest on officially now. Max Brickman is the managing director of Heartland Ventures, which he founded in 2016. Heartland was formed to do what no other venture capital fund has done, and that's connect established Midwest companies with coastal startups, giving business leaders a voice in the tech transformation happening in their industries. Leveraging a network of strategic investors composed of private, often rural, and mostly multi generational business owners and operators, Max has effectively formed the largest network of mid market tech buyers in the Midwest. He's a forward thinking venture capitalist with a passion for expanding tech innovation into smaller, underrepresented heartland communities. And Max closely follows and analyzes Midwestern business trends to gain insights into pain points, tech needs, and generational opportunities. And he manages the fund's relationships with other venture capital partners. So I'm sure, Max, you see a bunch of trends there, and oversees key investment decisions with his what always seems like a growing Heartland team. Max, welcome back, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
As I was reading your bio, and again, we've talked before, so I'm familiar with the Heartland story. But I recently had an opportunity to go to the Cleveland Federal Reserve. They had a policy summit that they do every year. And I got to speak on it at a breakout session panel, but it was about increasing opportunity in rural parts of the U.S. with a focus on the district that the Cleveland Fed represents. But I was kind of the one tech representative. And as I was reading that, I was like, I should have had them just invite you to the stage and be the guest on that. But Max, yeah, welcome back. And yeah, tell us a little bit about what it's been like the past couple of years with Heartland. When we last talked, it was probably like full COVID a couple years ago. But you guys always seem to be doing interesting stuff with new news.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk more about where, there's opportunity to, promote tech and just development in kind of more rural markets. I think just overall, I guess briefly on that point, I mean, that's where the customers are in large part, right? And depending on the market, at least that you're selling into. But if you're selling into, ag tech or a lot of manufacturing tech or logistics tech, your customers are in these more rural markets, or at least in, markets that are not San Francisco or New York. And so, if you really want to be able to sell into those companies and have an understanding of who your customer is and have an open line of communication, like you should be here, you should be in those markets. And so I'm a huge proponent of it. But we can get into that more.
For sure.
I think we're both very pro Ohio and pro opportunity over here. But it's been an exciting couple of years. And I guess we, since COVID, we raised our second fund. And as you mentioned, all of our investors are mid-market family businesses, basically. And so we represent, basically, 125, think the $500 million manufacturing company that, flies over most people's radar, but at the end of the day is a huge consumer of technology. They're using HR tech and workforce training and automation and supply chain software. They're using everything at a huge level, and they're thinking about what they can use more of. And so we aggregate hundreds of those folks, understand what their pain points are, where they see opportunity, and then we look to identify solutions that are targeting their market. And so we invest in early stage seed Series A technology that is effectively solving problems or creating opportunity for businesses in the markets that we were just talking about in the Midwest. So a lot of manufacturing, logistics type technology.
Yeah, for sure. And the thesis, it seems so simple, like not simple, but like, why hasn't everyone done? Because it's an opportunity where everyone's buying and selling the same people in San Francisco, but connecting the two. And I know we've talked before, so I don't kind of rehash previous conversations, but has the past few years with COVID and kind of the acceleration of digital and virtual, and then just this reshoring, onshoring opportunity, have both sides kind of accelerated the light bulb of like, oh, we want to invest in these tech companies, and then maybe these businesses, we want to buy from these businesses. So has COVID helped kind of advance like your thesis that you've had pre-COVID and well before all this started happening?
Yeah. And our hope is that it's simple. And I think to the first point, it should be simple. The fact that there should be more connectivity between the coast and the Midwest. I mean, there's a lot happening on the coast that, there's a lot of there's a concentration of certain types of tech talent, of certain expertise, and there's certain expertise in the Midwest, and you have, you know, you have both in both markets, but at least in our view, you have a disproportionate amount of expertise in in these sectors that can be leveraged. So yeah, I think it hopefully is simple, and so hopefully people make more of those connections. But to your second point on, has COVID accelerated the adoption generally, and it definitely has. I think a lot of these businesses, there were companies that were not, that were not using Zoom, that were not doing virtual meetings, that were flying out everywhere. You think of, we don't really invest in the healthcare space, but you think about healthcare, and you think about my wife is a psychologist, and telehealth was, it's crazy to think, like, wasn't a thing before COVID, and they didn't reimburse for it, and it wasn't allowed in many hospitals, and now it's just kind of a given, and that's allowed so many more people to access services they couldn't otherwise access, or it was very expensive or time consuming to take off work and drive and to do all those things. The same thing applies to a lot of these business owners who are running their business that weren't using certain types of technology that COVID just accelerated, whether it was supply chain visibility, or workforce training, or technology to help identify talent within your existing workforce, because labor shortages made it such that they had to start looking inward for more senior positions. Whatever it is, I think it just forced people to look at technology a little more critically.
Yeah. What of the two sides, the Silicon Valley, let's just say, entrepreneur that's building, or the Midwest kind of manufacturing, family owned, what was the tougher kind of, as you've been going through this, and I'm sure it's kind of ebbed and flowed and it's changed a bit, but what's been kind of tougher to kind of like sell Silicon Valley on, like selling into the Midwest, or getting Midwest to say, like, you need to invest in Silicon Valley. It's risky. This isn't real estate investment. It's not, 3 or 4% returns. It's 1 or 2 out of 10 will maybe be a hit.
I think you nailed it, that it is kind of like this like two-sided marketplace.
Yeah.
I think that's something we think about a lot of.
Yeah.
Everyone has that at some level, and for us it's the coast, it's not coastal, but it's tech, and then industry that we're connecting. I think industry is pretty rational, I think, and especially now where the folks that are running it are very much exposed to technology and they see the value. They just don't necessarily have the same level of exposure to it, or at least the same level of like access to it.
Yeah.
And so it's, in many cases we've seen, it's technologies that they're sort of pushed, that where technology is pushed by one integrator that they work with, and that's sort of it, or something that they were sort of sold on, and that doesn't address all of their needs. And so I think there's always an interest and willingness, and sort of like a hunger to see what else is out there from these companies. I think on the coast, there's always a perception of this is flyover country, and it takes a bit of education, but not much, surprisingly, to be able to say, okay, believe that or don't believe that. But again, when you show someone a map of the Fortune 1000 companies and where they're located in the U.S., it's a massive cluster in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And so people start to realize pretty quickly, okay, I need to be here.
Yeah. And you do kind of, I mean, I really empathize with that family on, the manufacturing business, let's just say in a state like Ohio or Indiana, Illinois. And I know you originally came from Indiana. But I would think that their average, where they don't have an innovation department, probably, like maybe they have an IT person or a few of them, but it's a smaller shop. And, I think of it now, like these conversations around AI, for instance, we've been having a bunch of them, and there's a lot of buzz and as these things pop up, but then there's, you have to sift through it and find like the real stuff. And you have these massive corporations that are trying to figure out even something like ChatGPT. And on one hand, I'll talk with one Fortune 1000 company and they've banned it. No one can use it. On the other hand, someone's telling their teams, use it, but use it to 50%. And then you can't, completely just copy and paste it, because it's probably going to be riddled with a few errors. But like, how do you, I mean, it's a large task to if you're not in this every day, you don't have the resources of a big organization. And obviously big organizations, can still be slow and bureaucratic, but You definitely empathize with some of these smaller, but that's a competitive advantage if you can unlock that, which is why I love what you guys are doing.
I mean, I think you're nailing like where the difficulty is with, but the challenges for some of these business owners that
Yeah.
they see the opportunity, they are sophisticated, but there's resource constraints,
Yeah.
and,
Yep.
you have to prioritize, and at some level you look at generative AI and ChatGPT and think, I know there's so much opportunity here, but like there's five other fires to put out and we're expanding, and we're 20 people short in this project, whatever it is, and they have to prioritize, and
Yeah.
ChatGPT is like, it's still nascent, it's still early, it's kind of nebulous, like what can I really do with it? And so it's hard to rationalize putting in time into that, and they don't have the ability to hire someone to do it. And
Right.
that's where our hope is. We're a fund, right? So
Yep.
we don't charge anything. What we really want is just feedback, right? Like
Right.
we want
Yep.
a business's perspective on a technology. But our hope is that we can be a resource for some of these companies to be able to share technology with them and say, hey, you guys are busy, you don't have a lot of time, so we're looking at a couple thousand of these a year. Let
Hmm.
us just send you 3 or 4 of these for you to take a look at, that
Yeah.
should probably be on your radar. And all we want from that is just like candid feedback. Rip it apart if you don't like it, tell us you love it if you do, but all we want is feedback, and
Yeah.
that helps us immensely. I think it helps a startup immensely by giving them candid feedback, and hopefully it helps the corporate by, or the business by, kind of industrial business by giving them access to technology
Yeah.
earlier than they'd otherwise see it.
I guess, I'm making a bunch of notes, so we'll jump around a little bit because I'm loving this,
Please.
and like you said, this is my wheelhouse too. Although I don't do what you guys do, I'm not smart enough to. But
That's not true.
but what is how what would you recommend, I guess, to a tech company? Because that's one of the things where, as you mentioned, if you look at where the Fortune thousands are, or $100 million plus, but like they're just littered everywhere. You drive up and down 71, across 70, 75, like 77. They're just all over, and you
Yeah.
never know about them unless you're in that industry, or you happen to know someone that works there. But for tech companies that are looking to sell into that segment, it's very, I'm sure, very different than other segments, and especially if you're, again, selling software to software, and all of that, like in the heart of San Francisco. What are some of the keys that you've seen successful companies within your portfolio or just network, as they're looking to navigate, build those relationships, and sell into maybe industries that aren't tech per se, but they want these tech solutions that companies are building?
So what we've recommended, I guess for your audience, or for the folks that you know that are already in Ohio, like embrace it,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and network locally, and for the people who aren't, and we recommend this to a lot of our portfolio companies, the ones that are not in the Midwest or in Ohio, be here. And
Yeah.
not necessarily, I'm not trying to argue that everyone needs to relocate to Ohio,
Yeah.
although we'd love that, but either make it, allocate resources to being here a certain amount of time. If this is where your customers are, if you're selling consumer product, I get it. But if you're selling, to the industrial sector, you need to be where your customers are, and you need to have that open line of communication. And by hiring a team here and by allocating resources here, it's sort of forcing you to do that. It's creating more connections between you and your customer, and it's making that just closer. Um, and so I think it's just kind of committing to
Yeah.
understanding that that's like where you need to be.
Yeah. I think it's spot on. And it's funny because, like, this digital virtual world that accelerated so many
Yeah.
opportunities, we're not getting rid of it, but like we're definitely coming back to, like, the in person and people, but it's got to be high value. And, as you're saying that, of like committing it, because we see companies all the time, and, some of them are headquartered here, some just have, maybe salespeople here. And you can tell ones that are like doing well just based on the team that they build, but also I feel like empowering that team, because if you have a headquarters, in San Francisco, New York City, and they're kind of dictating, like, hey, you're local in Ohio, you're selling to Ohio, like, but we're telling you to do it based on what we think in like our tower in like San Francisco or New York City, like that's probably not going to work long run. And you can kind of see it where it's like the values just aren't aligning. And so, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But I want to pivot a little bit to, like, to venture capital. So you mentioned Fund Two. Um, you have a fascinating story where you're from South Bend, Indiana, moved to Columbus, have built a fund, you're investing. Um, venture capital and dollars coming to Ohio, that is not something that is normal and has not really accelerated over the past 5 or 10 years. Where, if you look at the slice of the pie, what we get versus the coastal hubs, now places like Austin or Miami, it really hasn't changed much. But you're kind of an exception to the rule that you've done this. What's your kind of take on just overall venture, getting more of it here? What's it been like for you? And if you're, I just want to chat about that and see kind of
Yeah.
your perspective, because that's something that I have a lot of one-offs, a lot of coffees with an entrepreneur or maybe someone who's looking to invest. And it's a big, it's one of those hurdles that we have to get over.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to ask and be thinking about. And you know, and you mentioned this before, but I guess just to reiterate, we're not, a Midwestern fund necessarily,
Yep.
and you mentioned that we're not. But I guess I say that just to say that, like, we're not incentivized by any outside source to
Yeah.
to suggest that, we're not paid by the state to say
Right.
companies should move to Ohio.
Right.
Like,
And you're
we're
not just
doing
investing in Ohio. Like, that's
it,
not the thesis. It's like, no,
exactly.
it's tech. Yeah.
And so just being completely transparent on
Yep.
that side. That said, from our investor lens and from our investor hat, we think the best thing for a lot of these companies is to have operations in Ohio. And so I guess I look at it from like more the economic development lens, which
Yep.
I'm still a huge proponent of, and it's been something that I've been passionate about, really from the beginning. But again, that's, separate but parallel, I guess, to
Yeah.
the fund. Is that I think there's two ways of building it, right? You can grow from within, and you and so many others in the state are doing an amazing job of promoting that, of encouraging people to start businesses, to get funded here, to stay here. So there's growing from within, and there's importing, and that's very much what we want to focus on. Is that, again, not to repeat myself, but like, there are companies that are being started all around the country
Mhm.
who should have operations here,
Yeah.
and whether it's Ohio or Indiana, there's, again, this is where your customers are.
Yep.
Yes, it's a lot less expensive. Yes, there's a massive talent pipeline, all these things that are great, but there's a lot of places in the country that are less expensive than San Francisco. But what you have in Ohio and in a lot of these Midwestern cities and states is that uh, you have a very collaborative corporate community who's willing to try something new, especially if you're local and you're sort of in their community. And so you come to a community like this, and you're going to get the support much easier than a lot of other places to sell into, a big lots, a
Mhm.
nationwide, pick your major, your, P&G, whatever it is, where people are going to be collaborative here. And
Yeah.
so I think that's what I think there's an opportunity for the state to leverage
Yeah.
that collaborative nature to attract more startups and funds to be located here.
Yeah. And I think that I think it's because some of the success stories that Ohio has, I think of like an upstart that they're headquartered in San Francisco Bay Area, and they opened up a small operation, a small office in Columbus, and it just somehow kept like doubling every year. And you look up, and at least at one point, and it might still be true, where they employed more Ohioans at the Columbus, Ohio operation than they were in the Bay Area. And again, it's not necessarily a Columbus, like, born, bred, built in Ohio, like entity. But I mean, you talk about importing a ton of jobs, and then to your point, and like, this is what you do. It's like the pipeline of like technology, expertise, company capitals out on coasts, but then connecting it to talent, the people, customers, etc. And so that kind of, like, I call it like the HQ2 model of
Yeah.
which you've been talking about now, is like, hey, yeah, you can build some stuff here, and we want to keep doing that and building that. But there's also, I think, like a really interesting like import model too that could really get built out.
One thing, you mentioned the HQ2 side. One thing I don't have a solution for this. It's just
Yeah,
more
well, and
something
I don't either.
to think
It's
about.
just fun to talk about.
But no, it's great. It's fascinating, and I think there really is a lot here, and something that we should continue to think about. But on HQ2 side, if you're not Amazon, a lot of these smaller companies that want to set up operations here are not eligible for a lot of the tax credits that the state will provide, because they're not headquartered here and they don't have, the majority of their employees here, and so there's certain
Yeah.
tax credits they're not eligible for. And I think that's sort of a missed opportunity, to say, look, you don't. And I understand you're not getting all the you don't get all the tax revenue if you're not headquartered here, from the state's perspective to recoup that. But I think there is an opportunity for this to be, again, secondary operations for a lot of
Mhm.
companies who, will hire 5 employees when they're at 20 people, and when they grow to 500, just like
Right.
Upstart, that's going to grow with them, and that creates a massive amount of value and opportunity for people in the state and just the state overall.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Uh, I think that's been one I've been thinking about more and more. And so to hear you say it and kind of see it in your work too, because um, I mean, even to get to 5 people, I mean, that's a lot of venture funding to have it completely, just an Ohio headquartered
Yep.
company. Again, not that we don't want that, to happen, but you kind of import 5 people from San Francisco or Boston if you're in, biotech or something, and that can start to really stack up. And then you're still keeping those pipelines between the coasts. And again, as you see it every day, the connectivity between all these different regions is just absolutely vital. As we're starting to kind of like we'll got a couple, maybe one more topic that we can dive into. I would love to hear your thoughts on the world. And that's a big topic, but we'll boil it down. And so, Intel's
Yeah.
coming to Ohio. It's in manufacturing. It's semiconductors opening up a new industry for our state. I don't know if it would have happened had COVID not happened, where reshoring and bringing things back, and then we have China kind of hanging over, and what happens with Taiwan and TMSC over there. Um, how are you thinking about, as you're working with all of your investors, your businesses, your networks, as this being like an opportunity to, I don't know how long this opportunity lasts before maybe we kind of lose it, but as these companies are willing to bring operations over, or perhaps we're looking for more secure, shorter supply chains, how are you thinking about that? How are your contacts kind of considering this opportunity that we have found ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive amount of dollars coming in, and I guess just on like a global, like strategic, kind of U.S. On the global kind of view, we're really at the middle of a major, you know, source of potential future conflict,
100%.
of
Yeah.
chips manufacturing,
Yeah.
and one of the big limitations for being able to like meet, I think what we like Ohio and Intel is trying to do is going to be people and labor, and
Yeah.
not just like Intel being able to hire, but all their suppliers and the construction and the development and the water and the electricity, everything going into it. And we're labor, skilled labor is still in short supply, and
Mhm.
in certain areas, and that's where I think there's huge opportunities again for technology to be able to supplement that. Uh, where if you have a finite number of people, technology can help upskill them so they can do more, so that we can accomplish these goals, and that can make us more globally competitive. And so I
Yeah.
think there's like this almost like existential need to be adopting technology
Mhm.
and to be testing technology so that we can get this up and running as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And I think from our LP's perspective, or our investors and the corporates we work with, they understand that that there's opportunity to um, use technology, and they also understand, just being honest, that there's going to be more competition for some of this
Mhm.
labor, some of this talent. As Intel and their suppliers come in, it's going to attract a lot of people into Columbus, but you know, Intel, it's going to be competitive, and
Yeah.
so employers need to get creative in the type of environment they're providing, the type of technology they're able to leverage, all these different things, and now is the time to be doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let's start to wrap with, we'll do some kind of quick questions. The answers don't have to be quick, but they're kind of like, they're
Sure.
fun questions. First one up that we'll do is, what is what's and as I was reading your bio, you're studying all these different kind of trends. You're talking with a bunch of smart people all over the US and probably beyond. But what's a trend or kind of some type of movement in this tech innovation space that you found interesting, but you think more people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I've been really excited about certain areas of like industrial recycling,
Hmm.
meaning like a lot of these industrial facilities are huge emitters and polluters, and there's just a lot of waste as well. and a lot of it, there's a certain degree of like inefficiency, and you're hauling the recycled material away, and there's opportunity to allow some of these manufacturing facilities to do more with their scrap and with their sort of like byproducts, and just like the waste that comes out of whatever their normal operations might be. That could extend to water, that could extend to, scrap metal, to just other things. But I think there's an opportunity to do that on a kind of a micro level, like within a facility, as opposed to needing to centralize that and haul it, hundreds of miles, which is completely inefficient to do that. We haven't seen a ton in that space, and I understand there's some limitations on how that can work, but I think there's some emerging technology that could be interesting. So I'm excited to see more of that.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that answer. Second, and maybe this is along the same lines, but maybe it's something different. But as an executive, you're running your fund. What's a challenge that you're personally looking to solve? And so, it could be something tech or business related, or something on the management operations side of Heartland. It's
funny. I mean, you mentioned the manufacturing companies like trying to figure out how to leverage, ChatGPT and having other priorities that they're that's competing for their time. It's the same thing with us.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a massive amount of opportunity to leverage, generative AI, and it's still a little bit difficult to, customize it for your own use of like being, I just can't wait until we can import our CRM and all of our like internal knowledge and have it, I think that's soon, but I think it's, we're underutilizing. I feel like everyone's underutilizing it because it's so powerful, but I just keep thinking like, what else can we be doing with it?
Yeah.
But again, resource constraint.
Well, yeah, I mean, as we were talking about, like, so like if you, and this is what you live and breathe, and your team as well. And, so how does a traditional, kind of non-tech business, and everything's tech enabled at this point, but we've sat in conversations with schools and superintendents and teachers and, healthcare systems, and, everyone is thinking that around this AI stuff is, and I think, unfortunately, kind of the default is like, well, if there's just so much that I'm just going to not, and then let everyone else kind of figure it out, which, you hope good, smart people are the ones that are stepping forward and actually figuring out what to do. But it's just so much, and it's a bit overwhelming. So I think it's easy to just kind of like, we'll see what happens in the next year or so.
We're testing a lot of different things now, but it's always, that mentality of like, there's always more, not just like there's things we're not leveraging, but then you wait 3 months and a new version's released, or new integrations are, it's just, and so you just constantly have to keep working on it. It's exciting, but it's a lot.
It's overwhelming for sure. What's next question? This is third. What's a favorite read, listen, or watch? So book, podcast, show, what's something you're enjoying right now?
I've been getting really into like Cold War history, which I think has been really fun. And so I just started like Compatriots as a book, and so a couple different kind of Cold War era. Hopefully it's not because we're like going in a similar direction, but
because we're in Cold War too.
Right. But it is just fascinating to see just like the decision-making process of people then, and like how close we were.
Oh, I won't do follow-ups there, because that's also an interesting one of my interesting historical points of time that I enjoy reading about too. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, of just how close multiple times, and dominoes fall, and it just, the world could look very, 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 very different. Which
did you watch Oppenheimer?
I haven't yet. Have you seen it?
I have. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, all the reviews are pretty awesome, but I have not had a chance. So
it gives you kind of a glimpse into like what led to the first elements of the Cold War. It's just,
we take it for granted. I mean, one, it wasn't that long ago, and two, as we're kind of in this, this space now with China, and obviously what's happened in Russia and Ukraine, like, things can spiral pretty darn quick. But we'll save that for the Cold War podcast we do. Fourth, second to last one, the fourth one is, if you had $100 million to put towards one problem, building out one type of solution, something, big, $100 million, what would it be?
Yeah, I hope it's not a cop out, because it's kind of what we're focusing on. But I think if we could create, a truly scalable network that allowed people in sort of the tech ecosystem and people in like the industrial space
Yeah.
to actually communicate and collaborate on like a very effective, continuous like basis. So
Yep.
there's that just faster feedback loop. I
Yep.
feel like you'd have the pace of innovation would explode.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, which is why it's 100 million. But
Yeah.
if you could do, maybe that's not even enough. But if you could accomplish that, I think it's hard to tell what would the amount of value you could
For
capture.
sure. Yeah. No, I love that idea. Final one. Summertime, Columbus, Ohio. Where's maybe you're recruiting a new company's coming in to sell to some of your partners from a coast, or you have you're inviting someone into town for work. Where are you taking them for a nice meal or to show off Columbus?
Ooh, depends on the setting, but obviously I'm a huge, living in German Village. I'm a huge
Yeah.
Lindy's Patio
Yep.
fan. I've gotten really into the Sycamore Patio as well, which is just kind of, it's small, but I like it. And I guess I'm just going to stick on German Village and with
Okay.
Chapman's for more of like a nice sit down. But I'm a big like urban core fan and like showing, especially guests from out of town, that like there's like an urban, downtown food and drink scene that's like that's fun and I like seeing people's reaction to that.
Yeah, and another good answer, especially when those are short-lived or patio seasons in Ohio. So
Take advantage of it.
yeah, you got to get them in while you can, because it's about half the year is a no-go, and and then
Yeah.
other nights it's 100 degrees outside. So
Or hailing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yesterday, yeah.
Well, Max, that wraps up kind of our second podcast now together. Anything we didn't get to that you want to share, or anything you want to direct listeners towards to check out on you or Heartland, or just anything you want to as a final comment?
No, anyone that's interested in chatting about any of this, feel free to reach out. We post a good amount of content on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow us there or reach out anytime.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, you guys do a really good job with the storytelling and telling this message, because you're cracking it's an important one, and it feels like you're like you said, the $100 million to put towards this thesis that you're working in of connecting these two worlds, because at the end of the day it becomes it's like we're talking about these geopolitical stuff and America's competitive advantage. If we can help those businesses, that's where millions of Ohioans, millions of Americans, that's where they work, livelihoods, important parts of communities. So I love your thesis. I love what you're doing and where you're spending time at. So thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming on again and sharing your story. So really appreciate everyone listening and watching. Obviously, if you don't mind giving us 5 stars, it helps discover more stories like Max and Heartland Ventures. So thanks everyone. Have a great day. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.